welcome to another exciting episode of Quietly Confident Introvert podcast. This is, as you know, the podcast for empowering introverted women in business and leadership to develop quiet confidence to harness their strengths so that they can create the life that they desire, achieve their ambitions, as well as develop courageous leadership. And today, I'm so excited because our topic for today is how adversity turns into advantage to achieve holistic success. Not only that, I'm even more excited because I've got a guest with me today. And my guest today is Gill McKay, who practices inquisitive coaching, is a sobriety coach, TEDx speaker, applied neuroscience trainer, and best-selling author of Stock, Brain Smart Insights for Coaches. I'm excited because we will learn about what it means to be, to be coached or to have inquisitive coaching. I'm really curious myself. I'm really inquisitive, I guess is the word, to understand what that word means and how inquisitive coaching works. So sit back and make sure that you tune in and you will be empowered. You'll be transformed by Gill's story. So let's welcome my guest, Gill, to the stage right now. Hi, Gill. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Like I have been saying, it's really exciting to have you. And I just want to share a little bit about, how we came together, how we met, because these chance opportunities to meet each other is what brings us together to have these rich conversations. So we were in a summit together, isn't it? We were in a summit and we spoke on that summit. And I remember that time that I was really intrigued by what Gill was sharing. And time passed, we finished the summit, everybody went their way. And then we had a speaker awards ceremony and a speaker conference. And who sits by me? Gill. And we just couldn't stop talking. And I thought this kind of conversation is the type of conversation you want to bring to other people because there are rich conversations and there are things that will make a difference. So today, Gill is here and will not only share her story with us, she will enrich our lives with that story and help us to understand how you can turn adversity into your big advantage in life and achieve holistic success. So welcome again, Gill.
Thank you. And indeed, it was fortuitous for us to, in a very busy conference hall, find ourselves sitting next to each other. It's great. Really, meant to be, serendipitous, I think.
Indeed. So briefly, I want you to share your story and what has shaped you to be the inquisitive, to develop what is called inquisitive coaching. Tell us a bit about what is inquisitive coaching and why have you developed it?
Right. Well, inquisitive coaching is a relatively new business in so much that I have been working for 4 decades, believe it or not, 4 decades, half of which has been in the corporate world. And I was doing a lot of coaching in the corporate world. I was a leadership development trainer. And really, when I think back to the sort of work that I was doing, it was really all about helping leaders build confidence. I think a lot of the work that I have done has been working with people to become more comfortable in their own skin, to be confident about themselves, the work, how they show up in the world, and also to be curious, because throughout my life, I have recognized, maybe not as a youngster with this language, but I really do believe that curiosity is my superpower. And I really do. And to be really candid with you, curious coaching, somebody else had the intellectual property for that name. So it became inquisitive coaching. So when I came out of corporate life, which I did when my youngest child, who's now 21, so 21 years ago, I came out of corporate life, I wanted to set up my own training and coaching business. And that's when I really started to delve into where do I want to focus in terms of my work? How can I show up in the world helping others? others. And I qualified as an executive coach and mentor at that stage. And like I said earlier, I kind of focused at that stage on working in the coaching side of the business, working in helping people gain clarity and confidence, no matter what the context was, whether that was speaking on a stage, whether it was through a promotion, whether it was dealing with a challenging boss, or whether it was dealing with a decision to change their career, maybe even in a life situation, whether it was how do I get my next partner? It could be so many contexts. So I qualified as an executive coach and mentor with the Institute of Leadership and Management at level 7, which is postgraduate level. Qualifications matter to me. I'm one of the, it's back to the curiosity. I am a lifelong learner. I'm
Yeah.
always looking at the next thing that I can learn, because when I'm learning, all sorts of ideas come to me. It's the curiosity nature of me. When I'm learning something novel, when I'm learning something new, that's where I get my ideas as to how I can apply it, how I can show up in the world more for in service of others. So inquisitive coaching was actually born around 3-4 years ago, and you know this story, but your viewers won't know this story. It came about because I became sober. I stopped drinking nearly 8 years ago now, and for various reasons, I'm sure that some of that will come out during this interview. That I stopped drinking. I was drinking too much, and I got to the stage where I thought I need to do something about it. I tried to, be one of these sort of take it or leave it drinkers, but I wasn't. I was a take it
Mm,
drinker, and using it for other reasons. And in my sobriety, because I was better off having nothing, I just literally, it kind of evolved. And then one day I had this amazing sort of like bolt of thunder that sort of said to me, why don't you turn your coaching skills into helping other women who, for various reasons, are struggling with their drinking, and that they may be curious about what life might be without alcohol? So
mm,
that's where inquisitive coaching was actually born. It was in the sobriety sphere. And actually, it's very interesting that in the sobriety sphere, it is common parlance to talk about being sober curious. I actually
mm,
tried to grab that as a line that I could use myself, but I couldn't, because it's such common parlance in the English language. So sober curiosity is a field that I work with a lot of my clients, who I work with individually and also in groups, who are wanting to either take a break from drinking, or have a go at stopping drinking, or stop altogether, because there are various states of readiness. All of them are curious about whether they're ready or not. That's another matter, but they're curious about what their life could be alcohol free. What could it be like? And it's a big question. And I'm using the word inquisitive and curiosity in a very positive sense. There can
yeah.
be a lot of trepidation and nerves around that curiosity, because it can be any change can be quite nerve wracking. What's on the other side of that curiosity? If I'm curious and I take action at the same time, then who am I? Alcohol
Yeah.
free. What
Yeah.
person am I going to be? So that's really where inquisitive coaching came about. It's through, I've used my coaching to very much specialize in that sphere of helping midlife women, when they're ready, to be curious and to step into an alcohol free life, so they are
Yeah.
free of the monster of alcohol that has been in their life before.
Yeah, and I see myself as somebody who is very curious, and I think
Yeah.
as a coach, curiosity is something that is very useful as a gift, as something that
Yes.
you use it as an opportunity to really question your client, where they are, their journey, what's brought them to where they are at that particular moment.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
interesting that it's used in the sobriety work that
Yeah.
you're doing. And I was very intrigued by that work itself, and
Yes.
listening to your TEDx talk on it.
Yeah.
That was part of the what excited me about this whole thing, because as somebody who is teetotal, I don't touch a
Yes.
drop. I never have, but I always suspected that the culture around drinking, even though it was always celebrated, is not something that I would consider to be as healthy as people thought it
Mhm.
was, laugh. And interestingly, whether or not they say Big Brother is always watching somehow, because when I clicked on the news today to just go through the news, my usual daily just
Mhm.
glance through the news, I stumbled on an article about alcoholic user disorder, something like
Yes.
that, AUD.
Yes.
And it specifically said it's also quite a problem among midlife women,
Yes.
and it's that they don't consider themselves to be alcoholics.
Yes.
However, drinking is like what they used to cope or have used to cope for many, many years.
Yes.
So they talked about the stories of mothers who go to gene o'clock, have the gene o'clock
Yeah.
time, or when they take kids together and are sitting in the
Yes.
same space. What the
Yes.
mothers then do is watch the kids play and drink, and this gradually goes on. When people leave work, they just say, "Oh, have a drink to chill" or something, and it becomes a way of dealing with life, of coping with life,
Yes.
of escaping life. So, based on this, without me trying to share a story that I know nothing about, but I was really intrigued by that article. I saved it and I thought
Yeah.
this is so important because there were quotes from the NHS and all that.
Yeah.
So, tell us about your challenging moments that you faced on this journey, and how you have become the person you are today from that journey of, you know, living on drinks and
Yeah.
other challenges that you've had, and learning how a lot about yourself through that process.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think I'll come to the alcohol bit at the end. I'll do it sort of chronologically because talking to you on that seat at the conference, and my goodness, we touched some deep subjects there, didn't we?
Yeah.
But it's actually every day's a school day, Patience, isn't it? And I loved the way that you questioned me so much that I actually thought, what were the pivotal moments in my life? And we all have pivotal moments. We
Mm,
take, because they're part of our lives, they might become ordinary to us, but actually when we look back, all of us have had experiences that shape us,
mm,
and that we can choose to look at as lessons rather than choose to look at as real problems. They might have felt problems at the time. So the first one for me, and there are three really, and the last one is going to be about the alcohol, and probably many more than three, but three that I think are share worthy and possibly other people might identify with. So the first one for me was when I was a child. I was born with a heart complaint, a heart condition that I'm blessed, utterly blessed, that is completely cured. It was cured when I was 12, but we are talking in the 1970s, when I was 12 when the operation was done. So my operation was 50 years ago. And so there, I've given you my age there, which is absolutely fine. So, 50 years ago, the research into heart surgery and particularly cardiac surgery in children was much more in its infancy than it is now. And so I was born with this heart condition that really didn't have any effect on me as a person, apart from the fact that I was incredibly thin. So I had a very, very large hole between my two ventricles. And what that meant was that I didn't get the oxygen in the normal pumping of the heart and how the heart works in the body. I didn't get enough oxygen to the various parts of my body to be able to, give me the nutrients. So in order to get nutrients, I ate man-sized meals, and yet I was a tiny, tiny, tiny little girl. And I had blue nails, I had blue lips, and as that started to get more pronounced, my parents, and they were both doctors, but not in the cardiac arena, they recognized, because they had been advised that they could wait until I was 18 and I could make my own decision about whether I had surgery. Because in the 1970s, there was a mortality rate. There was a
mm,
50-50. If you take a child to open heart surgery, she might not get off the life support machine. We might not be able to start her heart again once we've done the surgery. So they took an extremely brave decision to have the operation done when I was 12, and it was all a success. Now, how that all shaped me was that up until 12 and up until my operation, and even a couple of years after, I just felt really different from all of my friends. People
mm,
treated me with kid gloves because I was the ill Jill. Well, they all called me Jilly in those days. You know, you've got to be careful with Jilly because Jilly's got a heart condition. And I was doing gymnastics and hanging off the rope. You know, I was as strong, and because I was eating these man-sized meals as all of the other kids. But I felt different. I felt different, not just from the perspective that I had to have hospital visits and lots of investigations. So that was a sort of thing that actually happened. I felt different from my friends because I think all the other mums were saying to their daughters and their sons, sort of, just be careful with Jilly, you know, she just go easy with her. And I
mm,
felt like this kind of I felt like an outlier, even, you know, and that's really, really challenging and not really understanding why was it me that was born with this health condition that meant that I had to have hospital appointments and I had to have all these horrible little investigative operations. I was brought up with a gorgeous, really, really loving family, but I kind of felt the pressure of my illness and also almost the guilt of my illness as a child. And we don't know how to deal with those emotions when we're younger, because I'd also lost a sister. So there was a sister, I have a sister now, but there was a sister between us who she died of a brain tumor. And after Frances had died, when I was 2, she was 3, that's when they discovered why I was so skinny and I had the blue nails and the blue
mm,
lips and all of those symptoms. So I think the learning from me there was that as a child, I wanted to be a very good girl because I knew my parents were grieving for my sister, even at a very, very young age. The subject of Frances's illness was quite taboo because my parents were grieving. So it was my grandmother that talked to my other sister and myself, that she kept Frances alive for us. And then I
mm,
had all this illness and hospital visit myself, and the normal childhood relationships of forming relationships with your school friends, etc. It was more challenging because I didn't feel normal. There was a
mm,
fund in my local town to send me to Houston. So we were fundraising to have an operation. You know, we were fundraising. I was the girl who with the hole in the heart. I was the girl who had the fundraising. I didn't want that. I just wanted to be a kid. And then after the operation, which was wonderfully successful, and I thank you to medical research, and thank you to my parents for also taking the decision. The decision at the time was taken that for my recovery, I mean, goodness me, it's different now in 2024. For my recovery, I needed to be on half day schooling for 2 years and not participate in games. Well, you
mm,
know, there's another thing when you're just going through puberty and you're, you know, those ages of 12, 13, 14, you're not even in school all the time. You're not participating in games or physical activities with your peer group. So that was an interesting start to my life. Very interesting. Feeling different and also knowing that there's a potential mortality rate. You know, my parents, of course, tried to hide that for me, but I knew I ended up having my operation in Great Ormond Street, which was, I knew, was the hospital in the UK and the reason that we didn't need to carry on fundraising for a hospital in Houston in Texas. You know, so I
mm,
knew it was the hospital, so I must be pretty ill. You know, so that was a massive sort of foundation of who I was. And I think I developed, well, I know I developed my curiosity then, but it was kind of like person centered. It was kind of like, why me? You know, what is it? But I'm very gifted with my parents. They were absolutely wonderful, and my father particularly, massively curious person, and he helped me to frame it as, you know, it's wonderful in a way that you're different. Isn't it wonderful that, you know, you've had this experience? What can you learn from it? You know, but I guess when you're a kid, you don't really frame those answers the way you would if you
yeah,
were in a coaching situation as an adult, you know. So that was number one that really shaped me about honoring my difference and understanding that life isn't always plain sailing. And actually, sometimes when you feel like an outlier, sometimes you can use it to really get to know yourself and build some resilience and strength around it.
mm,
The second one was in my 20s when I just moved down. I went to Manchester University and came down to the big smoke called London to get my first job, which everybody wanted to do. And I worked in the tech sector. It makes me laugh when I look back now. I started in marketing and then moved into human resources and training. And it makes me laugh that I was working in this big tech company and I didn't even have a computer on my desk. It's that long ago, that we didn't even have computers. But I met on the training program. It's a lovely graduate scheme. And I met lots of people. It was fantastic. Really, lots of fun. Lots of alcohol. We'll come to that in a bit. But I met the guy who would become my future partner there as well. I was hugely impressed by him. He was 20. I was 22, and he was 30. So he had a flash car, and he was in sales and all the rest of it. But it was wonderful. We developed this amazing relationship. But he was married. He was married and separated. He was married to a lovely woman who I got to know very well, but they'd separated, and she was from Trinidad and Tobago. And basically they wanted, it hadn't worked out, but they were friends, and I became friends with her too. And she remained married to him so that she could get citizenship, and I was okay with that. That was
Mm,
okay. But I kind of avoided some of the stuff that at my intuitive level I shouldn't have avoided, about the fact that really underneath it all, here was potential wife number two. And there had been lots of other women in his life as well. He was really a serial philanderer. And like many women in these situations, I kind of thought, well, I will be the one who can change him. And I
mm.
kind of wish I'd listened to Charmaine, the lady from Trinidad, because she thought she was the one who could change him as well.
Had
you
to
know,
be all women who tend to do that, and even as a coach, that
yeah.
personality, they're trying to save people, perhaps.
Yeah, and that's really interesting as well.
Mm,
I felt that not only could I change him, but I didn't like that characteristic in him, and I felt that I am a rescuer. I
mm,
will almost wear that as a label. I kind of I think all my experiences have helped to drive home not just the curiosity, but my innate gift of empathy. But sometimes we know in our strengths patients that we can over apply our strengths, and I can over
yes.
empathize. Oh my goodness me, I can
Mhm,
over empathize to the
yeah.
extent that it can hurt me. But to cut a very long story short, I was very happy. Very interestingly, when I look back, I had some trepidation on our wedding day. And I thought, am I doing the right thing? But it was I was 28, so I met him at 22. So 6 years later, we married. And it was done by the time I was 30. And it was done because within the first 6 months of our marriage, he developed a relationship with my best friend.
Mm,
So, interesting language, best friend. And
yes.
also, what was extremely interesting was the fact that when I was able to sort of critically appraise the situation and be really away from the initial hideous emotion of the whole thing, I actually was more disappointed in her than him. And
Mm,
I find that really interesting because it was almost as if, when I look back, I did have some therapy and I had some good coaching around it as well. But I think I almost expected it of him because he was proven, in that regard. But I felt that betrayal from my friend and my husband very, very strongly. And if we can flip it to something very positive, I know absolutely to within the core of my very being that one of my values is honesty. It
mm,
really, really matters. Honesty matters to me. And I think that's why I felt the betrayal of, whether it was, a sexual act, an affair, whatever, it was a betrayal
mm,
because they lied to me. And it's often, isn't it? And we know this in coaching, that our clients or people, they actually can start to articulate their values very strongly when something has happened that is really challenging,
mm,
when behavior flies in the face of their values. I knew immediately when I found out about their affair that there was no mending, there was no sticking plaster going on this. I knew we were going to separate, and we were trying for a baby, and I'd always wanted to be a mother, and I knew that I would prefer to be childless, not married, have no partner for the rest of my life, but live an honest life.
mm,
Hard though it was, I am not, it was really, really tough, but I couldn't stay with either a man or a friend. I couldn't, who had, thought that what they were doing was okay,
yeah.
and they stayed together. They had two children. Guess what? He had another affair. Guess what? So they're not
So,
together anymore.
yeah,
Yeah.
interesting just to come in there because there's some
Yeah.
key things that you said that quite interesting, which is when challenges happen. I always
Yeah.
tell my clients this, and I quote it in
Yeah.
almost every speech: challenges are chances for change.
Yes.
And sometimes you can get drowned in the whole challenge and the whole problems that happen. But at the same time, what you said was key, was that was one of the ways that you discovered what you call your non-negotiables. And I always say
Absolutely.
that values are non-negotiables, and if we
Yes.
treat them that way, they become the anchor upon which we build
Yes.
our lives. So for you
Absolutely.
discovering through that process that honesty is important, and honesty of yourself, being truthful to yourself, because you had to go through the process. And as you were talking about this story, I was hearing the ways in which you are being truthful and you stay truthful to yourself. Or where do I own responsibility for these things that have happened to me?
Absolutely.
But also kind of relationships that I built around knowing that somebody wasn't honest anyway. And then you thought, I could live with it. And we all do that. You go to
We do.
work or you enter into relationships, you find yourself in places, and it's like, I really don't like this. But you get that intuitive message in your mind saying to you, I really don't like this, but you go with it. You go with the
Yeah.
flow. And some people do it for many, many years. And those years are kind of years of like, you're not living to your fullest potential. You're not living to your fullest being who you're meant to be. And as you're going to continue to share, it led you down a different path that, that created problems. So carry on, tell us about, the
Yeah.
pathway that all this journey
I
now
think
led.
I think what you say is so relevant about, I kind of it's so relevant to my story, but to obviously to everyone that if we are going to kind of compromise on our non-negotiables, then we do have to realize that we're making a choice to do so,
Yeah.
And it was in that challenge with my ex husband. It was in that challenge that I really knew my strength around my non-negotiables, and that was a non-negotiable. I understand the fear of separation. I wonder how it would have been if we had had a child. Well, we didn't, so I don't know. That's hypothetical. I really do understand the difficulty of relationships splitting up, and this way and in other ways as well. But for me, I love the way you put it, Patience. It was non-negotiable, and it
Mm,
was non-negotiable because of me really anchoring and rooting down what mattered to me, and honesty is what mattered to me. And sticking with the question around challenges, the third piece is about the alcohol. There are many more challenges I've faced. I haven't just faced three challenges in life, but these are the ones I wanted to highlight today. And the alcohol is related also to the honesty piece, because when I was drinking, I was not shining my light or living to my full potential, as you said before.
mm,
And I was also in a mindset of denial. In other words, I wasn't being honest with myself. And I'll tell a small story to get there, but the point of change came when I had to be brutally honest with myself and face the misaligned life I was living. Yeah, and I had a choice. I had a choice. I could carry on that way and carry on drinking, or else I could man up and or woman up and actually do the inner work to help me get to a place I wanted to be. And what happened, I started drinking. I'd always been a bit of a party girl. We do sit behind these. So I think that the whole value of honesty was very much part of my ongoing alcohol story. I started drinking a lot more when I'd split up from my husband, and it was a way. You used the word coping before, when we were talking about alcohol earlier on. It was a way of coping, and I went out, I socialized an awful lot. I actually, rather surprisingly, met my now husband very quickly, and but I was kind of like this rock of a woman, really resilient. It didn't matter. I didn't need a man in my life, but I met him quite quickly, which was a delightful bonus, I guess. I'll have to tell him that I described him as a delightful bonus on a podcast.
you get
But
some presents as a result.
absolutely, a delightful bonus. But it was really interesting. I partied hard during that phrase. I think I was just trying to step into my own skin and show myself what a powerful woman I was, even though I was quaking metaphorically in my boots, because all, I'd had this promise of this beautiful married life, and we were trying for a baby, and and it all fell apart through a dishonest betrayal. But the alcohol started to ramp up then, but it started to ramp up even more in my 40s and my 50s. And I think this is classic. You mentioned the article that you read this morning. It's classic for midlife women. I was a menopause does play a part. So all of a sudden, people, and perimenopause, people start to feel quite discombobulated. What's going on? They're unhinged. Their hormones are all over the place. But also, it's typically a part of life where people who have families, they it's what's called the sandwich generation. So it's where caring responsibilities may increase both for youngsters but also the older generation. And I
mm,
found myself in that situation very, very strongly. My mother had Parkinson's disease. They lived 200 miles away in the north of England, and in the south of England, in the Devon area, my husband's parents lived. And his father died very suddenly, and his mother was disabled. She was in a wheelchair. My mum was in the north, 200 miles that way, with Parkinson's, and my dad was struggling to look after her. Fortunately, my sister and brother were nearer, but I wanted to help as much as I could, and and just be with her as much as I could. So there we were with a family, and me driving up to the Manchester area, him driving down to Devon, like ships that pass the night, full-time jobs, kids going through stuff, exams, and their own things. I had three children, and there are two who are very close to each other in age, and then one who's 6 years younger. And I could have been very much defined as overwhelmed or burned out. I probably was. I could really have done with some coaching or some therapy or some help. But what I did was I took friendship from the bottle, and it
mm,
definitely became my crutch. And it's very interesting. I'm very friendly with a menopause coach, and we're very interested in talking about alcohol's um, influence on the menopause. And I can't say what it is because I cannot just demarcate or pull apart what was my menopause symptoms and what were my hangover symptoms, because it all happened at the same time. I discovered when I stopped drinking that my menopause had stopped. Which was wonderful because I'd kind of had both at the same time. But my drinking ramped up with that whole sandwich generation experience, and it ramped, but it also evolved. So it became quite intense at a particular time when we decided that we needed to bring my mother-in-law up from Devon to come and live with us, and we moved house to accommodate her because she couldn't look after herself. So it was either going to be she had to go into a care home, or we would get care at home for us. Now, I was brought up, despite the accent, with a very Scottish family. We were in the north of England, but we were Scottish, and I am Scottish. I view myself very proudly Scottish. And a lot of Scottish families are three-generation families. It's very common for granny and grandpa to live alongside mum and dad and kids. Very common. So my grandmother, my father's mum, excuse me, she lived with us. And as I went back to the beginning of the story, she was incredible in helping us with our sister's death. She was absolutely amazing because my parents they were so grief stricken they couldn't talk about it or keep her alive in our minds. And so for me, it was the natural thing to have Margaret, my mother-in-law, come and live with us,
mm,
knowing it would be hard because she was in a wheelchair, we'd have to have carers, but also knowing how good it is for children to have a person of the older generation in the house. I knew that on so many levels, it was the right thing to do. But patience, boy, was it hard. And I
mm,
tell you, of course it was hard. I mean, she was a wonderful woman. I mean, she's gone now for 6 years. Absolute wonderful woman. But she didn't want to be in a wheelchair.
mm,
She was struggling with that. She felt that she was coming into our life as an outsider, even though she was granny. She knew we'd had to move house for her, and we didn't really want to. We loved our house beforehand. We left the neighborhood. We've only moved a mile away, but it was just such a beautiful road that we lived in. We were very friendly with everybody. It was challenging. And what was the learning in retrospect from it was I would do it again in a heartbeat, but I'd set different boundaries because there
mm,
were three people in my marriage. She was an adult. Of course she was. She was older than us. She was an
yeah,
adult in our household. and yet we didn't want her to feel like a child, but we also needed to have our marriage as well,
Yeah.
so she would spend every evening with us because we weren't going to send her to bed, and in actual fact we had to put her to bed, she
Yeah.
was totally reliant on us. So that was the point at which, like, I really want to reiterate, I would do it again, but I would set different boundaries. That
Yeah.
was the point at which my drinking really, really ramped up,
Mm.
because I was missing my husband. She really wanted to spend time with her son, not me. She wanted to be with her son. In some ways, her son had replaced her husband, and
Yeah.
she was grieving her own husband. It's all classic stuff, and we lived through it.
Mm.
And the kids loved living with their granny. She was great fun. She was really wonderful. They got the good side of her. We got the taking her to the toilet and dealing with
Yeah.
her up. But and I'm not being a horrible person when I say that. This is family life. And in the meantime, my mum still had Parkinson's disease and lived 200 miles away. It was very,
Mm.
very hard. So, and we lost my mum, we lost my dad, and Margaret was the last one to go. And I just, what happened was, and I think this is classic midlife, the sandwich generation, and full-time working, and drinking, just drinking far too much to cope. And what
Mm.
happened one day was, I just thought, and it really was a bolt of lightning. It was, I just don't like myself anymore.
Mm.
I was really being quite, excuse the word, but quite bitchy to my mother-in-law. I wasn't showing up the way I wanted to be as a mum. It was my clients that got the best of Jill. I showed up really well for them, despite the
Yeah.
hangover I probably had. But the people at home got the bad side of me.
Mm.
And it's the relationship to honesty really matters, because it took me a while to find the language around it. But I was living my life in misalignment. I had turned into somebody that wasn't me. I wasn't kind as I could be to my mother-in-law. I was
Mm.
behaving in resentment, even though it was me that said, she should come and live with us. We can look after her. We will create a loving home for her, which we did. I was living so out of alignment and in dissonance, and lying to myself about the amount I was drinking, and
So,
giving myself the excuse of it.
hmm. Let me come in there because there's so many keywords that you use
Yeah.
that is so vital to, when I started to talk about the fact that I work with women 40 plus,
Yes.
who are midlife and going through their situation, is because it was at 40 that I kind of, in my own life, decided that enough is enough of who I've always been. I need to
Yeah.
reinvent myself. And so I always say that midlife is, I heard it referred to as the messy middle. It's
I
the
love
messy
that.
middle, and it's important to unravel the mess. And it's because most of us, it's at that time that our own parents are getting older.
Yeah.
We're taking on new kinds of responsibility. At the same time, work is an interesting place to be because you might have tolerated a lot of things about life and or maybe a career that didn't suit you, but suddenly you're questioning, what's my legacy? Am I going to be putting all my energy into this? Then I always say that the key problems that introverted women face, because obviously this show we're talking to introverted women, and you might not be introvert or you might be ambivert, but the key point there is, I always say there are four key challenges. One is overwhelm. One is feeling that overcommitment, overcommitting. And when you talked about the fact that you had to make some commitments, not have boundaries, those are the things. When you overcommit, you lose boundaries, and you have to walk around. The biggest challenge I faced before I encountered coaching was putting on a mask
Yeah.
and not really waking up every day and thinking, oh, okay, patience, who are you going to be today?
Yeah.
And it wasn't
Yeah.
really. And I had to start saying, patience, you need to be who you are meant to be. And what was important is I made a statement. And I think when you talk about honesty, is so important. I made a statement for myself and I said, who I am, what you see is what you get.
Mhm.
So, because you said something very interesting, your clients were getting
Mm.
a different part of your family was
Yeah.
getting something else. And I was like that.
Yeah.
behind closed doors, as soon as I walked through the door, no, I wasn't taking alcohol, but it was food or it was medication for
Yeah.
migraines. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this, when we're not living in alignment, I love the word misalignment because people
Yes.
don't when we're living in a misaligned way, our life is kind of, there is an inside out. There
Yeah.
is an outside life, there is an inside. So once you close the door, everything falls off, and that's the story. So I like the fact that people listening today, a lot of the listeners are getting some key nuggets about you're not alone. This is the messy middle that everybody goes through, and not allowing it to be a time not of crisis but of revolution is the story
Absolutely.
that Jill is really telling today, and most especially very vital of some of the shifts. So tell us more about, there were some shifts, there were some things you said in your TEDx, which I will also put a link for people to watch,
Thank you.
that were very important stuff about how you transitioned and how you made your own pathway to what we call holistic success right now, because it
Yeah.
wasn't it was just one-sided.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you said there, Patience, resonates with me. The whole, and it is related to alcohol and beyond alcohol as well. Putting on that mask and showing up every day with your clients in a performance is exhausting. And that's really an example of living a life in misalignment, in dissonance with who you really are. But I also wonder how many people actually do the work to find out, who am I? Or
Mm,
ask the question, what do I really like about myself? So I really like the fact that I'm empathetic. I really like the fact that I'm curious,
mm,
but it's taken me a while to be able to articulate that. But because I went on such an extreme journey of, well, let's call it revelation or self-discovery post alcohol, I had to kind of grab back the bits of Jill that felt right to really ground myself in, who am I, and work out, who do I want to be? And does that feel congruent? Does it feel aligned? Does it feel right? Is it the woman my husband fell in love with? Is it the person that I used to step onto the stage and be really proud of? I didn't want to live my life with a mask. I didn't want to live my life in dissonance, in misalignment. And we
mm,
have this awful phrase that is often used in the alcohol circles about how, people can show up as fully functioning. Yeah,
mm,
it's a complete myth, because if
mm,
you are unhealthy in any way, if your mind is full of dissonance and denial, and you're lying to yourself, you're not fully functioning at all.
no.
You're not firing on congruent cylinders. You can't show up in this sort of, in the energetic way that you want to, or in the, or receive in the way that is right and proper, to respect, in respectful relationships. It's
Mm,
this whole area of dissonance and misalignment. This is what I'm developing a bit more of a speaking career at the moment, and it's that I'm really focusing on, is living an aligned life, but
mm,
finding out what your alignment is for you, because that's the
mm,
work I do with my clients to help them get alcohol free. Yes, there are physiological things I help them with so that they can negate their cravings, but quitting drinking is all mindset. And
mm,
quitting drinking isn't about having an alcohol free beer. It's about understanding why you drank in the first place, what you were using, what you were
mm.
trying to numb out, what
Yes.
crutch you were wanting it to be. And that's the inner work. So when you talk about mindset shifts, when you talk about, the sort of change, I had to do that inner work. I had to actually model the way of the coach that I was for my clients. I
Mm,
had to use the same tools with myself. And I had
mm,
to be prepared to be honest, back to that core value, be really open and honest with myself
mm,
about who I really was. And that sort of work, as you know, values based work and identity based work, it can take some work. And I had to be really honest with myself about the stories that I'd been telling myself. So, all the things that
mm,
I'd allowed myself to get away with, all
mm,
those things. I had to sort of say, is that really true, or is it just a story? What are you going to allow yourself to believe now? It was almost as if I had to reboot myself as a new computer,
mm.
but
It's what
keep the
I
bit.
call courage. I always talk about courageous leadership, but courageous leadership
Absolutely.
starts with courageous self leadership. And
Absolutely.
people see leadership as something you do in the corporate space, something you do maybe in the public, but actually, leadership is starting with leading your life, saying to yourself, giving yourself self command and following through with it, asking yourself, do you want those thoughts? Do you want do you want that next bottle? Do and then following through with the command, following through with the authority that you're exercising in being able to make choices in your life. So I like this journey that you've made, which
Yes.
makes you, when people say, oh, are you a leader? Of course you are. And why are
Yes.
you a leader? Because you've been through that journey of allowing yourself to face the reality, the truth, and then saying, oh, it's no longer mom did this to me, my partner did this to me, um I was overcommitted. It's now I'm taking responsibility. That's what
Absolutely.
courageous leadership is: taking responsibility,
Taking,
owning the outcomes that have come out of it. I always say to a lot of my clients, I said, having self-compassion, and I think that's another question I want to ask you,
yes, of
is
course.
when they're facing me and they're speaking, I'll say, you have to have self-compassion. And the reason why is because you're 50 years old, and if you're 50 years old, your problem is probably 50 years old, and this is the first
Yes.
time you're actually handling it. So for you to expect to overcome it in 6 months, you're not giving yourself self-compassion. So how would you say that self-compassion, maybe how did it play out for you to be able
Oh,
to overcome the things that you went through?
well, self-compassion is essential. It's absolutely imperative. So going back to what you were saying about leadership, I totally agree. Leaders. It starts with self-awareness, doesn't it?
Mm,
And starts with that self-honesty. And I think when you are in some form of recovery from something like alcohol, or there's something that that's happened in your life. For me, it was alcohol, where there is a lot of stigma and shame and guilt around perhaps past behaviors. And I do this work with my clients as well. Is self-compassion, I think, is central to everything. This is about, you can't get to forgiveness of yourself or acceptance of yourself, of past behaviors and where you're at now, without self-compassion.
mm,
And one of the things I think that helped me very much is that I've talked already about being an empathetic person. I'm also naturally a very kind person. I'm kind to other people. I remember years ago, I was doing, it was one of those psychometric questionnaires, and I think it might have been um, the Myers Briggs
mm,
questionnaire. So it's ages old, but I remember there being a question, and I really had a problem with it, because I think both of these are values. And it was, would you prefer to be known for being kind, or would you prefer to be known for being fair? And fairness, I have a great sense of justness, of being just and fair with people, and that honesty comes into that. But actually, you could cut me through the middle, and I would be a kind person. But what I
mm,
wasn't doing for many, many years of my life was being kind to myself.
mm,
And I think so that's where self-compassion comes in. It's about being able to take the lessons. I know
mm,
that's a very overused phrase, but being able to take, because I can't change my past, but I
no.
can change my narrative of my past. I can change the way that I see it and how I weave that story going forward.
Mm,
So it almost sounds too good to be true when I say I have no regrets,
mm,
but I don't, because I can't change what's happened, but I can change my experience, my response to what's happened.
mm,
And that's what I did. That was and that's where self-compassion was absolutely pivotal to help me change my response. And one of the sort of physical things that I did that helped me was, at sort of 5:30, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, when I would have been reaching for my first drink, because of course I deserved to have that drink because I'd had such a tough day. It obviously changes about mixing up your routine and changing habits. But what I did was, I moved to a different room, and I'd always wanted to write a book. So I thought, right, my recovery from this is going to be about writing a book. And
mm,
it wasn't, yeah, yes, I did publish a book, but actually it wasn't about that. It was about the very process of that time, that me time of writing. Some of it was rubbish. I've kept everything I've written, and it ended
mm,
up being the book I wrote for coaches. So it ended up being a business book. But what I discovered, that was a very self-compassionate act, was to give myself the gift of an hour of writing before
mm,
time every single day because
mm,
it gave me peace and quiet. It gave me time to get out of my head and into the pen, into the body. I discovered during that time that actually I really like the solitude. Sometimes I think people drink because they're not comfortable in their own skin and they don't want to
mm,
have, face those messages in their head, the gremlins in their head. I discovered I am an ambivert. I come across very much, and I'm expressive. I am an extrovert. I get my energy from the world around me, but I also very much enjoyed that time. And it was that hour every day, which became my new habit of writing. I'm terribly grateful for that. I really am, because I discovered so much about myself in that new habit.
mm,
I still do it. I still take myself off to the little writing. It was my grandmother's writing desk that's in our spare bedroom, and it's a it's a healing place, but it's a place of great peace for me. It's also a very creative place for me now.
mm.
But self compassion took place at that desk without a
That's
shadow of doubt. Yeah.
That's just brilliant because as we're talking, I was just thinking that's the topic we're talking about, isn't it? We're talking about how adversity turns into advantage. And,
Yeah.
in this story, uh, people talk about writer's block. You've given so many nuggets. And as somebody who is, as an introvert, I'm an introvert, but also ambiversion is something that
Mm,
has come along in my life as
mm,
I've matured because I know that there are times I can switch on the button of being extroverted, and that's on stage where I come alive. I'm comedic. I can move around in the crowd and talk to people. People say, "Oh, I don't think you're introverted," and I'm like, "Yeah, I think there is an inner wiring that you can't get away from." And this month, I'm focused on the word introspection because you
love
said
that.
something very important, and that is that wanting to run away from those gremlins, those thoughts. And so, even though introspection is a gift, it's also once you have to face that, what do you do with the thoughts that are coming through when
Mhm,
you tune in? What do you do with it? How do you handle it? What do you use it
mm,
for? So I decided that every month I have a keyword and I use that keyword to move my life, to lead my life. So I thought I am going to use the keyword introspection because I would have a lot of opportunities to maybe sit somewhere and rather than run away from what's coming, I ask myself, how is this a gift that you're going to use? And you use the word gift out of all the things that you've been through, which, like you said, you're only summarizing. We'll be here till tomorrow, if we
Next
had to
week.
share it. Yeah. So basically, you use that as a gift. So I really,
Yeah.
so many things to take away. But the key thing is, someone watching this will be thinking, I have my own vices. It's not alcohol. I always say the fact that I don't drink, that's one sided. I can sit with a tub of ice cream. That's my way of, you deserve this. You deserve a tub of ice cream.
Absolutely.
You deserve that nice piece of steak because you've had a hard day. Someone's been disrespectful to you. Someone's treated you badly. And the key thing that I have noticed out of all of these is once you can there's a root cause to
Yes.
all those things, and you have to go down to that root. And the biggest root is there might be bitterness and unforgiveness of yourself. That's where self compassion comes in, of
Yeah.
others. And you're still hanging on. They say unforgiveness is taking poison, hoping that somebody else dies. So, but it's obviously the misalignment continues, the slow
Yes.
death continues, and you have to give it all up so that you can reinvent yourself. So, what would you say are give us three maybe powerful pieces of
Okay.
advice that someone who is feeling stuck, who is feeling like they're going through quicksand because they're not facing the reality and they're not
Yeah.
taking responsibility, they're not courageously leading their life, yet
Yeah.
they want to live well. So, what are the three pieces of advice that you give them?
Well, I would say that the first one is actually a mix of self-compassion, but also a bit of tough love as well, because it is related to be kind to yourself. Learn self-compassion. I think that matters so much, but also at the same time, this is all tied into one. Recognize that if you stay stuck, you're actually choosing to stay stuck
Mm,
because you can. We all have the power Rubbish things may happen around us. They happen all the time, but we all have the power to choose our response to them. Now, when you're in the midst of the rubbish, sometimes you just don't think that's possible. It really, really is. So be able to be kind to yourself and allow yourself the time to just think about what might be a different response to this situation. So that's
Mm,
number one. Number two is, and this was related to alcohol, but it applies to absolutely every context, I think, in life, is the power of the pause.
mm,
Get yourself grounded. Find yourself some space. And by the way, this can be 1 minute. We all have 1 minute in the day. And if you don't have 1 minute, then find something that takes 1 minute to say goodbye to it. So you give yourself this 1 minute. The power of the pause, I believe, is when change happens. So, and it also is something I've learned very much is about getting out of your head and into your body. So
mm,
if you can, really, really, really take your socks and shoes off and go and stand in the grass. It grounds you. There's something about grounding ourselves into the natural world. Now, that does not give you as big a dopamine hit as a first glass of wine, but
mm,
by goodness, it can help you just to get out of your head and into your body. And that really, really matters in all sorts of contexts. So, light exercise like walking or yoga, or meditation, or though when I say grounding, that's what I mean by it's giving yourself space to pause. These things are a gift. So that's number two. If you're
mm,
stuck, if you're embroiled in all of this stuff, go and do something that is slow. Yeah.
mm,
And the last thing I would say is recognize that change does not have to be a big change. You know, I work now with a charity called Women Who, actually, they're a community interest company called Women Who Don't Drink. I'm setting up a mentoring program for them that's a free service.
mm,
And they are all about, you don't have to say you're going to stop drinking forever. You can
mm,
just be about taking a break or just stopping for a little while, or it can be about cutting down as well. But it's really interesting. I mean, I use this as an example because tiny habits compound. So
mm,
maybe the change is I'll have one less glass of wine on a Saturday. Yeah. But it
mm,
doesn't need to be about that. It can be about flossing your teeth. You know, you just need to floss one tooth every day. So
yeah.
take action every day. It can be a tiny action, but the tiny action you took on Tuesday last month will become a part of the compounding of the big action that you take in a Tuesday in
Mhm,
December. All
mm,
of these tiny habits add up. So if you're stuck, sometimes we feel when we're stuck that we have to take, like we have to give up drinking forever. And the forever seems so big that we don't bother doing anything about it. Just take one little piece of action. Take action today. One
mm,
little thing will start to build and compound and come into some sort of, get you out of that unstuck stage or state to something different where you might feel more mobilized, more resourced to be able to
mm.
create a change. So it's about
Yeah.
self-compassion, it's about getting out of your head and into your body, and it's about it's about tiny habits. And
Mm,
somewhere in there, I would say journaling. Journaling and gratitude. Get writing, because when
mm,
you're writing, you're out of your head, you're getting your thoughts out of your head and physically onto a different piece of paper.
mm. And I like what you said, the first one where you said um it's not just self-compassion, but tough love,
Yeah,
it's like two sides of the coin.
yeah, there is.
And then when you talk about the pause, but also grounding. So
Yeah,
pause to ground. I always say to people there's a passive pause and there's an
yeah.
active pause.
Love that,
A
Nathan.
passive pause, sit and do nothing. Give yourself the gift of space to actually be present and actually how does a minute feel to actually go past? We're rolling around so much that we don't even know how a minute feels. I know that
Yeah,
myself that when I
yeah,
I understand what a minute feels like. But that's like a passive pause. But an active pause is where you say, how can I ground myself? Step away from all the noise. Step away and find something that actually feeds that spirit because we listen to our head and we're in our soul a lot. When we ground, we get into the spirit. For me,
love that.
sometimes it's about going out and actually let me hear God. I've
Yeah,
always talked to God and said, please, I want all these things. And he's
yeah,
he's speaking, but I'm not hearing. So
Yeah.
the pause is about, okay, I'm actively listening. What are you saying? And I might just look at the sky and something comes back to me and it ministers to me. Then the
Yeah.
third one you said, which is that you take micro actions. Now,
Yes.
this one I want you to say a little bit more about, because it's tiny drops of water that make an ocean. And when you think
I
about
love.
the whole concept of tiny drops of water, the the thing, when you have a leak in the house, that's the way I want to use it. When you have a leak in the house, the time you notice the leak is too late. It's formed a big puddle and created problems. But it didn't start as a flood. That's why you didn't notice it. Otherwise, you would have had a gush. But it started at
Mhm.
tiny drops. And those tiny drops, they didn't dry up, then they made an impact. That is how tiny actions happen. And sometimes it's about the occasion and the opportunity. Now, Christmas is on its way as we're recording this. So, the occasion to actually see whether you can shift, while it's difficult, while it's around people who are drinking. People drink at some people are occasional drinkers, some people are, opportunity drinkers and all that kind of stuff. What do you suggest people do for Christmas, for celebrations and things where they're being pulled back because into some a habit that they're trying to break and
Yeah,
get their
it's such
mind?
a good question. And I actually say to people that there's never a better time to really think about changing your habit around drinking in the festive period, because there's an expectation that we're going to overindulge in everything.
Yeah.
Behavioral indulgences, food, parties, staying out late, and of course the drinking. Yeah, that is true. And present buying, shopping. So many people get themselves into debt at Christmas, and it doesn't need
Mm,
to happen. Think about all the wrapping paper that goes into landfill, all from a sustainability point of view. So it's actually, I think that there's never a better period or season to really practice some of these things and learn to be mindful. And the greatest gift I think that you can give yourself, particularly in an overindulgent season like Christmas, is the gift of mindfulness. So
mm,
really enjoying yourself in a way that is congruent with you. If you don't want to go to that party, don't go. If you don't want to have a drink, then don't have it. And also, just from this point of view of parties and socializing and alcohol, what is Christmas about? Well, obviously, for many people, it's about faith. But
mm,
actually, Christmas, from a societal point of view, it's about people. It's about
mm,
connection. It's about loved ones. It's about
mm.
time. You know, who really cares what is in your glass anyway? No one does. But they do, because they're always topping us up. There are lots
Yeah.
of tips and tools. I mean, just follow me on LinkedIn over Christmas. I'll give you lots and lots of tips and tools how to avoid the sort of people topping you up situation.
Yeah.
But
Yes. Yes.
the gift for yourself is to be mindful with everything. Do I really need all six of the mince pies from the Waitrose box? Or would I be better off not buying any at all,
At
or just
all.
buying a single one? It's really
Mm,
interesting. There is nothing like the gift of Christmas with no hangover. And
mm,
also, if you're not drinking, you're able to drive to the parties. You can come home when you want. You wake up on Christmas morning fully slept, without that fuzzy, horrid feeling of a hangover. I don't want to come across as being judgmental or righteous at all, but the answer to your question is the gift of mindfulness. So
mm,
if you're wanting a drink, then just really enjoy it, savor it, really think, engage your senses and think, what is it? What is it about the smell, the color, the taste? What is it you're enjoying? Drink it slowly. Don't glug it. You don't need to, because then you're not drinking. You
mm.
might as well just take a drug, because
Yeah.
if you're going to have the mince pie, savor it. If you're going to spend some money buying presents for people, really think about what that could be. Could it actually be an experience that you do together? Could it be having a coffee? It's all of this sort of stuff that I think we get sucked into the commercialization of,
Mm,
and we're probably quite hardwired for it, because we've enjoyed some of the commercialized aspects of it.
yeah.
But I think tiny habits you could start your tiny habits today, that just saying, actually, I'll just have half a glass of wine, or I'll mix that with water, or actually, thank you, I've found that I
Mm,
really like this lime cordial, and just move on. And it's your choice what you put in your glass. It's your choice what you put in your mouth. It's your choice how much money you
mm,
spend on Christmas presents, and it's your choice who you choose to connect with. And I would suggest that you start by connecting with yourself and give yourself the most amazing Christmas of mindfulness.
Fantastic. And, thank you for finishing off on that fantastic note of mindfulness, being mindful of yourself, being
Yeah,
mindful of the world around you, being
yeah,
mindful of, and the power of exercising your choice, exercising your power to choose the
yeah.
life that you really want. So thank you so much, Jill, because we've gained a lot of stuff. Even I have gained not
Oh,
about
bless you.
alcohol, but a lot about reflecting on taking responsibility, on ownership, on self compassion, on the things that slip away and cause us to slip, or the kind of challenges of midlife and all those kind of things. We've talked a
Yeah,
lot and covered a lot. We've had very, very rich conversations. So thank you for coming along. And for those of you listening or watching, there would be information about Jill in the show notes. Like she said, she'll be doing a lot of stuff over the festive period on how you can take control of your life. You follow her and you can follow all those tips and use those tips, because the truth about it is, when we want to take action, somebody in our corner really cheering us on, which is what we coaches do, cheering us on. We've been there. And Jill has said she's not trying to be judgmental, but she has earned a certain amount of, will I say, the medal of somebody who's really been beaten up by something and has overcome. And so it's not about being judgmental, but about inspiring you to say, if I can, so can you. Why not listen and follow and do the stuff? So thank you again. So as usual, we always leave with a quote, and I have this beautiful one, and it says, "Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit." And that's by Napoleon Hill. So glad that you joined us today for this
thank
rich
you.
conversations. And we are grateful to Jill for all that she shared. So if you're really an introvert that is struggling and feeling stuck and ready to unlock the power of your introvert strengths, develop quiet confidence, and embrace courageous leadership, that's what I'm here for. Get in touch and let's have a conversation. You might find that I'm the right person to guide you and to direct you and to help you and to be your cheerleader. So until next time, stay quietly, confidently introverted. Take care. God bless. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Quietly Confident Introverts. If you found today's discussion valuable, please subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast with others. Your feedback fuels our mission to empower introverted women leaders. Remember, you can also connect with me, Patience Ogunbona, at The Visionary Introverted Woman, where we are dedicated to helping you discover your inner strength and lead with purpose. Stay true to your vision. Embrace your introverted superpowers, and let's make a lasting impact together. Until next time, stay confidently introverted.